watch party on my personal page. If you're watching this now on Alder Darryl Brackeen Jr., please do the same. Hi, Michelle Rodriguez. How's it going? If you're just joining us, please like and share. If you want to be a part of the actual conversation, please post in the watch party uh, by sending your email address as we go throughout the conversation. Um, and you can join in and out. Now, for those that we do have on our panel, some may be here the entire time, others might have to hop off again. This is as conversational as you're going to get. Um, all right. All right, good. Please like and share. All right. So I'm going to introduce myself while everyone is joining on and the watch parties. I am Darryl Brackeen. I serve on the City of New Haven Board of Alders, which is the city council here in New Haven, Connecticut. And I really just wanted to have a series of conversations surrounding the national experience that we're now having. In particular, for the Black community, we're in a grieving moment. I realize that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen in this very moment, but I did not want the opportunity to pass us by and to continue the conversation on what I am calling the Black agenda. And for many people, that has a lot of political connotations to that. But in my opinion, if you are in America, you are in this American system, you actually are a political person. You have to engage in this system. Last night, we had a great conversation that went on for more than the time that I actually originally thought it was going to happen. Um, about Black Lives Mattering and what that means. What is the Black agenda over the 400-year history that folks of the African diaspora has been on these shores? We've seen nothing but injustice. Basically, and actually, let me give my disclaimer now. We're going to give our opinions. This is, and our opinions are not our fact, right? So as we go along, we're going to be educated. We're going to learn some things. We may say the wrong things, but even if we do, take it in love and stride that we are also learning and growing together. So anything that we're all saying, we are not speaking for our organizations that we work for. So I'll just put that out there now. We are speaking our own personal opinion, exercising our First Amendment right. So for those that are joining the watch party, I'm asking each and every one of you, please don't just watch, participate by sharing to your friends in the Black community in particular, but in your diverse communities, because this could be a learning experience for you. So I'll get back to what I was going to say, which was I want to talk about systematic racism. But I want to do that by actually showing a video. So I'm going to share my screen and hope this goes well. And I'm just going to show a quick video of what I found on YouTube. It was a nice little cartoon, but it was a good way to explain what systematic racism is. And I figured it'd be a great way to start today's conversation. I don't think anyone heard that. So I was trying to figure out how to share the sound. So I will figure that out later. But it's a great video, and we're going to show it later. But it was going to simply, yep, I got it, everyone. Thank you. Yes, basically, where it was going to end off was around the conversation concerning mental health and self-care in the Black community, and the need to have this discussion first and foremost on the minds of our communities. I'd like to first introduce our panelists that have joined us for this conversation. And I want to preface this by saying that there will be individuals that will be jumping in and out along this conversation. Um, and also we'll be taking live comments and questions along the way. So I will start with my forever First Lady, Chaz. Chaz, you can set the tone for who you are, your background, and your educational background and the work that you do. You have to unmute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chaz Brackeen. I'm a social worker. I have my MSW. I attended Fordham University, and I graduated in 2016 with my master's degree in social work. I also have over 10 years of experience working in the mental health field.
Sheena.
Hey everyone. Hi, I am Sheena Hutchinson. So I wear a couple of hats. So the first hat I wear, and not in any particular order, but I am an educator and I am an ordained minister. And so with these two roles, I have to practice a lot of self-care. So a little bit about my background. So my background is in accounting, but then I pivoted into the educational realm where I teach high school business courses. I teach accounting, so I actually teach what I still do a little bit of consulting still. So I teach high school students, a high school 9 through 12. I teach accounting, first year accounting, and I also teach foundation of technology. And then also I am an ordained minister where I am a youth pastor and also over the prayer ministry at another church. So I do have a lot of hats that I wear, but I love everything that I do. And so I think this is very important because, again, I work with people, I work with young people particularly, and I just think it's so important to talk about mental health and self-care.
All right, I can't hear anybody else, but I'm guessing everyone can hear me. Okay, good, great. My name is Shenira Billups. I too wear a few hats, first and foremost being a mom. That's my most important one. I also am an educator. I teach as an adjunct professor at Southern Connecticut State University within the psychology department. Southern, woo woo, go Owls, right? All the way. I am also a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor. I've been in the field of behavioral health, emotional, mental wellness for about 10 years. And I also lead the life course ministry at Breakthrough Church in New Haven, a community church. We do a lot of food pantry thing. Then it's a fairly new part, especially recognizing the behavioral health need within the community. And we do many forums, things like that. And yeah, I also have an LLC, and I can tell you guys about that later. But yeah, those are some of the things I do.
Yep. Yep, we have someone who's just joined us. I'm not sure why everyone's popping up as Chaz today, but once she's ready, she can introduce herself.
Good evening. My name is Malika, and I am a colleague of Chaz. We attended the Fordham University together. I am currently working towards my clinical license. I am an ABA provider that's applied behavioral analysis. I work with children on the autism spectrum. I provide early intervention services. And I'm happy to be here on this evening, and I'm looking forward to having some discourse around Black health within the, Black mental health within the Black community. I'm sorry, I've been rushing. I've been to the doctor on today, so just allow me to catch my breath. So yes, I'm here, happy to be here, and I look forward to what is to come from this conversation.
Excellent. Welcome, welcome. Yes, it's just a kind of chill conversation. Please feel free, grab your water if you need to. I don't know, just do what you got to do. We want to make sure that we are all taking self-care, if I dare say. All right, we have someone else joining us. I'll wait for their audio. Okay, while we wait, we definitely want to just reestablish the purpose of this conversation as folks are joining us. I'm asking folks on Facebook Live, please like and share to your page, and also participate in the comments, because we will be taking questions, comments, and concerns, really grounding us in this moment where we're grieving nationwide, in particular the Black community.
Absolutely.
And also, I want to provide a space to seek healing. And honestly, this panel has turned into just hashtag Black Girl Magic greatness. I am no expert in this area, so I'm just going to ask kind of the simpleton questions, like the basics around mental health, self-care, and that includes obviously the spiritual aspect. We're not going to take any specific case. You speak your truth, and we'll have that. So we have someone who has just joined us. I'm just going to ask that you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tiara Anderson. I'm so sorry for my tardiness. I had a lot happening here. I'm actually on orders this week for the National Guard because I do serve in the military as well. So I've had a lot going on doing that. As you can see, I still have my dog tags on. I probably should have taken these off. But anyway, on the civilian side, in my full-time world, I am a licensed master social worker, and I am currently working for the United States House of Representatives Office of Employee Assistance, where I do employment counseling. I don't know if anyone or if you all are familiar with EAPs, but that's essentially what I do. I serve the entire House community, which is Congress, their staffers, Congressional Budget Office, and United States Capitol Police. So they come to our office for any type of counseling, whether it's related to anxiety, depression, grief counseling, anything related to familial stuff, elder care, child care, whatever you can think of, they come to our office and seek counseling services for those things. So that's what I do. And I do serve in the Army National Guard. I've been on orders this week for assistance with the riots in our DMV area. So that has really been occupying a lot of my time. So again, I do apologize for being several minutes late, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you for considering me and for including me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm just really overwhelmed by the greatness that's in this panel room tonight. And thanks to my wife, who's obviously connected to each and every one of you in your respective places. And also, I'm just going to start with my first question. Like I said, I'm no expert in this area or field, but I certainly do know that our community needs some healing right now. And I want to provide this platform to help our community work through questions surrounding mental health and self-care. So I'm just going to put out my first question and let the conversation lead where it may. So, and this is to anyone that would like to start. What do you see as the major barriers for African Americans in getting adequate mental health care? I'm going to start with a loaded question.
All right. So as far as barriers for African Americans being able to get access to mental health care. Ooh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. My computer's acting weird. So I feel that a large part of that would be first understanding the access that they do have. And being educated about behavioral health. As far as we are advanced as a society, surprisingly, but not surprisingly, many are not really up to par on, getting a therapist, getting a counselor, having access to that. Sometimes it's stigmatized. It's like, okay, we're not crazy like that, but they do understand that there's change of language is needed so that way people can listen and they can obtain it. Sometimes it's also resources. So sometimes it's just pure lack of those who may be educated to provide those type of services in different areas. And that's why a big part, I can speak for myself in terms of counselors and everything, just be able to services, because you'll get those who don't even have insurance, but they have a desperate need to have those access to those kinds of services, because they can also provide other services that they need on a base level, general needs, things that are kind of exacerbating their behavioral health symptoms. Sometimes it's a lack of money, lack of food on the table, not having a place. Yeah, I feel like those are some of the barriers to them accessing.
I would definitely agree. And let me know if you all can hear me okay. I feel like it was just a tad bit choppy. Do I sound clear or?
We can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that for our sisters and brothers in the African American community, I think that we face a lot of stigmatization. I do believe that for a large part of us, I do think that because we're the new type of era, new generation, I feel like therapy and mental health is becoming they're not taboo anymore. I feel like people are becoming more comfortable. I feel like schools are having seeing more of a presence of school social workers, and mental health is being a large part of conversations on social media, and it's getting the attention of a lot of our younger kids, and that's a really great thing. But I do think that overall there still seems to be a stigma, because especially, and I'm thinking of my own family growing up, like I wasn't exposed to people actually going to therapy, and I grew up in a very small town. My family was very kind of close-knit, and I can just think of just stuff that happened or that I witnessed at family reunions, that I probably had a cousin who just everybody said, oh, she was just crazy, she was just a little off. And instead of saying, hey, cousin, whatever, let's maybe try, how you been doing? What's been going on? Let's try to connect you with someone. Are you seeing a doctor? Like, no one really gave that support. And it was just, she was just kind of ruled out as being crazy or the kind of outcast or the black sheep of the family. And so I think that for a lot of times, when people think of, oh, I'm going to see a therapist, they think of, oh, what's wrong with you? Why are you going to see a therapist? Are you crazy? Like, are you hearing voices? Like, we immediately go to the very serious mental health issues that people do have. But we immediately go there. Like, are you bipolar? Are you schizophrenic? Are you here for, like, we immediately go to the language and use words that would deter people from wanting to seek help. And so I think that there's definitely a stigmatization there when it comes to Black people wanting to seek out mental health. And I think that there is a level of being able to get resources and being connected to people in the community to help with those things.
So when looking at, I guess, from a multidimensional perspective, whether it be from the church world, whether it be from our own personal experiences, I think within the Black community, I think it depends upon which lens we're actually looking through. I think within the religious culture, we have made mental health from a spiritual perspective some sort of demonic force where individuals are their mental health concerns. So if you have, schizophrenia, what I would have always been taught is that you are not your, you're not your diagnosis, very simply played, you're not your diagnosis. And I find that when looking at mental health as a whole, we oftentimes, and I think Tiara, I think you're absolutely right that we are moving from a place where it has been taboo, right? But I think that within the Black community, and I think the pandemic that we're currently in has spoken to the healthcare disparities that are within the Black community, plays a big role in being able to attain mental health counseling, those therapies that would be able to assist in providing, mental health strengths for the Black community. So, I've noticed that a lot of times we prioritize things differently. And, when it comes to, say, for instance, finances, most Black families are wondering how they're going to pay their bills as opposed to putting money aside to, invest in their mental health. So, we have to really start to think about ways in which we can make the mental health attainment more affordable, more accessible to those who are in need, because it is a need within our community. And there are lots of traumas historically present within the present. And then even when thinking about the future, there are, instances where we start to get, just very, our senses become very heightened because of the thought of what tomorrow may bring. So I think we need to begin to push the envelope relative to really bringing forth and surfacing some of those issues, which we're doing now, so that we can be able to look at how we can be a resource for those within the community and make it so that it's accessible for everyone. And it's not just something that we demonize, right? It's not demonic. It's not something that we can just lay hands and put some, anointing oil and you jump around and roll around and then you get up and you A-okay. That's not the case. We need to be able to come together and be a unit, and really express those traumas that have affected us so that we can be able to move forward and live happier, healthier lives.
So can I go to add on to the conversation? So I'm coming from a Christian perspective. And so when you talked about the church, so I want to piggyback off of that. And so in Proverbs 11:14, it says, where there's no guidance, a people falls, but in the abundance of counselors, there is safety. And so I attribute that to, going to therapy, right? And so therapy is that one-on-one where you're going, depending on the type of therapy, because I know there's different types of therapy, where you can go and you're like discussing some of the issues that you're dealing with, right? And so that is not demonized, like you're because a lot of us has faced trauma. So therapy is to help us to get past the pain of the past. And so I want to preface by saying that. But I want to talk about counseling, because oftentimes I think that, especially when it comes to the church, that our pastor has all the answers, right? So I'm coming from an aspect of as an ordained minister, in that our pastor has all the answer. And that right there is false. Number one, our pastors are not clinical psychologists. They're not social workers. Now, some may be, but some of them have not been trained in mental health. Okay, yes, the anointing, I believe in the anointing, I believe in all that. But however, there is a point in a time where there has to be a shift, right, in our culture when it comes to, not going to the pastor for everything, because that's not the answer. Because the pastor might tell you something and it can mess you up. And so I think that we need to educate our pastors, number one. We have to educate our those who are in our congregation and telling them like what mental health is. And I know, talking and understanding like the access. I know that people don't have access, so they think their pastors is the counselor and the one to counsel. Now, again, there are times where you can go to a pastor to seek some wisdom and guidance. But when it comes to some really rooted, deep mental health issues, a pastor is not necessarily the person that you may want to go to. And so I think that, we should, this should be spoken about, right? Especially in our Black community where mental health is deemed or demonized, and it's not. And so I think like forums like this is to help us bring aware of the implications of having to go to therapy and knowing that it's healing in therapy. And again, and also educating those who are not really sure of what therapy is. And so, there's different types of therapy. There's art therapy, right? There is the CBT. Don't get me wrong, because I'm not a counselor. In terms of like the clinical aspect, I understand that, but like that talk therapy, right? So I understand those different aspects of therapy. But again, I think we need to educate our congregation on, the different types of therapy and not demonize therapy. And so that's kind of what I wanted to add to the conversation.
And I also wanted to say that I think oftentimes we have not created the space, right, to be able to express ourselves. So I find that within the Black community, we oftentimes suppress our emotions. We have so many faces that we have to put on in order to function in society. So we have our home face, and we have our work face. And a lot of the times we may spend more time at work than we actually do in our homes. And, depending on where it is that we are, we have to, I forgot, it's code switching. We have to kind of code switch. And we're not really able to deal with the issues that we have because there's so many obstacles and there's so many different barriers that we have to balance within a day, that when it comes time for us to be transparent with what it is that we're going through, we're probably too tired to even address it, right? So I think that in terms of really being open and being transparent, I think we have to, because even with us Black women, I don't know, and I can't speak for Black men, but I know that oftentimes when you are assertive and you speak up for yourself, within the workplace, you're looked at as assertive. So then you have to suppress the ways in which you may be vocal and able to express yourself. And that all plays a part in how our characters are slowly being molded to be less than authentic within ourselves. So I think that in terms of looking at how we can be able to move forward and free ourselves from the suppression that I believe that societal barriers have created for us, it's very important that we are transparent with ourselves and that we do seek those resources so that we do not allow it to, dictate just the different areas of our lives that we're trying to be able to either move forward or that we would like to grow in. So I just wanted to say suppression is definitely a large issue within the community, and code switching, which is something very new that I've learned as well. Thank you.
I kind of wanted to add on to that. I do feel that, just to put in layman terms, we can be hustlers in terms of like taking on a lot. We've dealt with it for hundreds of years. We tend to do the same. Something I found though amongst my sometimes work definitely is a legit need to hear things table, just basic needs for everyday life. But then sometimes I find avoidant behavior, because, you know, it's like, okay, with, you know, Philip, he was referred here by somebody, or just voluntarily because there's something going on and he just felt the need to be and to miss, you know, he comes to the first appointment, then he misses appointment number 1, okay. Number 2, he's kind of late, but he comes, and then appointments 3 through 6 into them upon grace, no show, no call. Then you run into him in the grocery. Hi, how you doing? But yeah, instead I've been working a whole lot, but do other things, but yet and still you're kind of avoiding that therapy time. But sometimes what we find is that when we go into counseling, a one-on-one service where we have to give of ourselves, that vulnerability, almost a kind of threatening to ourselves, because you're going to, you're talking about things like not just surface, but underneath the surface, stuff that probably face every day that you have the grace of going to work or doing other, just goes over your head and you don't have to think about it, because the feelings of being anxious, I don't feel like you're helpless. They're not very good feelings, but the space to talk about those negative emotions and how to appropriately to work, or, you know, just going to indulge in the next skill, super important, because what happens when you lose your job or do that activity anymore because something happened to you personally where you're not able to afford it? What then? What do I have? So expanding that toolbox they have, again, that vulnerability that comes with attending therapy to the grounds of it, that's a lot of hard work. So maybe, again, changing the language around therapy sessions, changing the language around one-to-ones, and like helping them to understand that, hey, listen, I'm being a friend to you. I'm trying to help you out because I see that, hey, it needs to be addressed.
Another point I wanted to piggyback on was as far as for African Americans, historically, African Americans, they have been continued to be negatively affected by prejudice and discrimination in the healthcare system. So what I mean by that is there are times when African Americans, they will go into mental health treatment, and then they will start treatment and start sessions with a therapist, and they're talking to the therapist, and maybe they don't feel connected to that therapist. So they may go to 1 or 2 sessions, and then all of a sudden there's a dropout and they don't go back. So what I have learned is that sometimes within the African American community, it is very hard to find a clinician or a therapist that you can talk to and feel that, you know, the session is going very well and that you trust them. And also, there are times when clients will find a clinician that they do maybe feel that they feel like they can kind of trust, but then all of a sudden, the further they go into treatment, they may have some type of clash with that clinician, and then they just kind of stop going to treatment because they do not feel like that therapeutic alliance is there with them and their therapist.
Malika?
So Chaz, I just wanted to thank you so much, because I was reluctant to be able to join for, you know, reasons that I've discussed with you, but this really has enabled me to, you know, just engage in something that is much needed. And what I find within the Black community, for those that have a mindset and those that have a willingness to seek therapeutic services, 9 times out of 10, and I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited about this conversation, but 9 times out of 10, okay, the individuals who desire therapy are usually going to therapy for those individuals within their intimate circle that are toxic, okay? That are toxic and refuse to seek therapy.
Right.
And I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but a lot of times those individuals that those that seek therapy are usually seeking therapy for those individuals that are close either to, it could be a boss, it could be a significant other, it could be a parent, it could be whoever it is that is refusing to seek treatment, and therefore in reflection, it's having an immediate impact on our ability to be able to function.
Right.
And to take it a step further, when looking at societal factors and all that's going on in our world today, and the ways in which we are still treated as 3/5 of a human being, that in itself, so we have so many battles that we're fighting. We're fighting battles either within our homes. We're fighting battles the moment we open our door and walk out, and the Caucasian or whoever it is clenches their purse or locks their car door, or doesn't. You can offer a good morning, a good afternoon, and people don't necessarily want to engage with you because there's so many different battles that we as African Americans or people of color, Black and brown, that we encounter on a day-to-day basis that we're unable to address because there's an array of different issues that we have to manipulate, and we have to multitask, and it just makes it so difficult. So I just wanted to say and add that a lot of times it's the individuals who choose to or refuse to seek therapeutic services, and it in itself having an immediate impact on us.
Right. And even right now, can you guys hear me? Even right now with this whole in the media, with everything that's going on, and the phrase that's out right now, Black Lives Matter. My question to you ladies is, in your opinion, what do you feel, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you? I know for me, for myself, I'll answer my own question. For me right now, I feel like, constantly I'm seeing all over Facebook and Instagram and even in the news, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. But how long must we continue to keep using that phrase, Black Lives Matter, until Black lives really do matter? There's just like so much going on right now with, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, even the situation that happened in Central Park with Christian Cooper, I believe his name was. And like everybody just threw out the phrase Black Lives Matter. But my question again, when are Black lives really going to matter? And what does that phrase even mean to you individually?
So I'll go. So for me, and it can almost seem like, Black Lives Matter is like a cliche, right? We're just throwing it out there. But for me, it's a statement, and it's a statement of, of resistance. And I say this because I know I was on a thread, and someone said, well, all lives matter. And we understand that. However, Black Lives Matter in this country, especially because of the injustice that was served for over 400 years. And so for me, Black Lives Matter is a statement of, of systematic oppression that has been happening. It's a statement of racism that has been happening. It's a statement of the educational gap, right? And so all these different things that we don't necessarily talk about, Black Lives Matter. So police brutality. When we think about, I know when I used to work in corporate, I understand what it's like to be that token, right? Black girl, where, I'm not making that much. I'm not making as much as my white counterparts, right? Male counterparts, right? So Black Lives Matter is a statement of we're fed up and we need to speak out on it. And so I think that when I think about words have power, and words, when we think about words is something that, I take very light. I don't take it lightly especially when we're speaking, especially positive. So it's like we're speaking that into the atmosphere so that we can shake something up, so that there's a sound that we are alarming. It's So when I think about it when I think about Black Lives Matters, I'm also thinking of it as a sound, right? Like we're blowing the trumpet, like this is what we're sounding the alarm for allowing people to wake up until, yes, it may be taking a long, some people are still asleep, as it relates to Black Lives Matter. But I think that, especially because we're in a pandemic and people have been closed in for so long, and that happened, it's almost like an outburst of energy that it's like new energy that has been brought forth in the atmosphere that people are really riled up. And it's not just Black people, but there's all people that's really chanting Black Lives Matter. Because even yesterday I was part of a protest. And I saw like everyone, all walks of life. And so I think it's something that, our other counterparts are waking up to, right? That have been asleep, or those who have been deemed to their privilege, right? Or, or not really understanding the privilege. But we saw a Black man get lynched in front of us on TV. So again, Black Lives Matter to me is a statement, and it's a sound. It's a sound of an alarm.
I just wanted to actually give my perspective on this too, on why Black Lives Matter in terms of how we're perceived in terms of our bodies, our work ethic in particular. I want to go back to some theories that some medical folks, there's a book I've been promoting called Medical Apartheid. I forget the author's name. It's a highly recommended book, and I just want to really kind of promote that and lift that as part of this conversation as well. The thought that Black individuals are able to endure pain at different levels than everyone else. The idea that Black bodies are always sacrificed or put on the line in a myriad of different ways through experiments over the years, even through wars, offering freedom from slavery by immediately putting yourself in a fight that has nothing to do with you. We've been capitalized upon economically and still haven't been paid back, but that's not the conversation today. It can be, but our bodies are part of an economic capital system. Thereby, we find many African Americans in low-income jobs, and Sheena raised the point. Black women, in particular, are not making as much as their counterparts, and they probably are 3 times more educated than those counterparts. But yet they're denied promotion, and we can go on and on about the economics of that. But I want to raise the idea of Black lives mattering, and that yes, Black people can enter into the space of self-care.
Yes, I love that. And I think that that is a really great question to ask. And I love what both Darryl and Sheena had to say. So I have to be honest, I have been, since everything happened with George Floyd, I have been struggling to find words to really put into like how I feel about things. It has been really difficult. And I still don't really honestly have the words, because it's a lot. And it's a lot to take in, a lot of different emotions, because especially as a Black woman, or as Black people, period, I feel like we hold so many different hats. And like someone mentioned code switching earlier, for a long time in my office, I was the only African American. Even when I was an intern, I was the only African American working in there, the only African American woman, the only person of color, period, the only African American, there was no other man. So I've been the only one for a while. So code switching is like my middle name. And so that alone is kind of a part of how I think about things. And so I think that that is also why I'm kind of struggling to even kind of come up with how I'm feeling. So that I'm going to leave that there, and then I'll go into the question. What Black Lives Matter mean to me? I think that it's something that we just have to keep pushing. I think that it's been something that has been around for a while, and years since not the initial, because it's been happening for a very long time, but since things started being recorded and filmed and put out there, it's Black Lives Matter. The Black Lives Matter movement has been alive and kind of still kicking probably longer than we even know. You know, they came to like mainstream and to social media probably in the middle of their progress or kind of blowing up. But I just think that it's something that we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing. I think that we've been protesting for a long time after, you know, Michael Brown, all the way down, you know, or Trayvon Martin, and all the way down to Freddie Gray, and just so many of our brothers and sisters that have been slain by the police. We have been protesting and protesting and protesting. And now I haven't been a part of all of the protests, but I will say I did march for Freddie Gray's because I was in my last year of grad school, and I marched for Freddie Gray. And I don't remember it being this big of a thing. I don't remember seeing so many different people of color. Like, I do not remember seeing them out there with us. And the way that our counterparts of different nationalities, different races, the way that they are showing up, it tells me that they're starting to hear us. And it's unfortunate. I think that it's unfortunate that I have to say they're starting to hear us. We should have been heard. Like, we shouldn't have to feel like they're just starting to hear me. We should have been heard. But we can't go there. We have to kind of, okay, let's keep moving along. Let's not get stuck in places where we have to kind of stew over things. But they're hearing us, and I think that they are joining in the fight with us. And I feel like this is why Black Lives Matter has to keep pushing, and we have to keep pushing the agenda and the things that we stand for, because we are coming together. And I know it may not always feel that way, but we can see it in the news with how many people from different nationalities, different walks of life, like, they're expressing anger. Like, they're not just walking, they're like mad. So I feel like all of that, all of what the BLM movement has been putting into their organization, Black Lives Matter, how hard and consistent and persistent they've been with pushing it, so like it's paying off. And I know we probably feel like it should have been that way, we should have been madder and all this, and I do agree, but we have to always take the meat and leave the potatoes. And I think that it's great things happening for us, and I think as a country, and although we feel very divided at some point, there is a lot of cohesion, and I think that we have to focus on that. So Black Lives Matter, to me, is a very positive thing. It's very necessary. It's very, very relevant. And I love what Sheena said. It's the sound. We're ringing the alarm. And we just have to keep standing fast in that, because it's paying off. And I just think it's just something, it's a way of life. Black Lives Matter is a way of life.
Malika?
So Black Lives Matter to me is a movement that has gained or is gaining momentum amongst other nationalities, right? We find that with George Floyd, we have people of every race that has come together in unity as a unified body to declare that Black Lives Matter. And it's unfortunate that we've always known that Black lives matter. That's our reality. But now we've come to a point where other individuals are starting to realize that, yes, we indeed matter, right? We matter, our feelings matter, our tears matter, our children matters, the air that fills our lungs matter, right? And police brutality has definitely been an issue within the Black community since law enforcement has come into existence. And this is something that we have been battling for quite a long time. My fiance just recently went to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to work directly with George Floyd's brother, Terrence Floyd, and he recently came back. He worked directly with him on the front line. You guys may have seen him on the news, but he is working, and he, just in terms of bridging the gap, and, unifying and bringing healing to the Black community, and partnering with those that are in high-powered positions, commissioners, to be able to look at and reevaluate their policies, their protocols, going from, peaceful demonstrations to policy to legislation. So, Black Lives Matter is something that needs to be reflective in our governmental system, right? We need it to be reflected in legislation, right? We cannot continue to have law enforcement agencies treat our, brothers and sisters as if they are animals, right? Because if you look in the climate of our, society today, people put more emphasis on lions, tigers, and bears than they do the killings of Black and brown individuals. So, Black Lives Matter is a reality. It's a reality that people are taking heed to. And I do wholeheartedly believe, and I stand very firm when I say this, that the term white supremacy in relation to the African American population will no longer exist. Why? Because we have so many individuals that are merging with other individuals of different nationalities, and they're procreating, and they're having children of biracial backgrounds. And if we look far into the future, it may, we won't be around to see it, but I truly do believe that the dominant population will be those of individuals with a darker skin tone, right? So the ways in which white supremacists are trying to preserve supremacy will no longer be that going forward. So Black Lives Matter is not only a movement, but it's our reality, and it's a reality that are touching the hearts of those who may have thought differently.
I wanted to just also share a study that Yale Child Study had done in 2016. The study that they did basically was a group of preschool teachers. They basically were observed in a classroom, and the person that was administering the study basically told the teachers to look at a child that you feel is misbehaving in the classroom. And if you feel that this child is misbehaving, just kind of like make like a tick mark on a piece of paper that they gave the preschool teacher. The findings at the end of that study was that the preschool teachers that took part in the study, they constantly gazed at African American males, little boys that are preschool age. They constantly looked at them. And in short of it all, the person that was administering the study actually stated that there was actually, out of all the students that the preschool teacher was looking at, there was no students that was actually exhibiting bad behaviors. So in summary, basically, the person that administered the study basically said that from the findings from that study, it showed that preschool teachers, they, from a young age, for African American boys, they constantly look toward them as far as them exhibiting negative behaviors in their classroom, and then leading that into, higher expulsion rates as when they get older and go into elementary, middle, and high school. So it even starts at the young age of being in preschool, and that's what that study had found. And that, like I said, that was Yale Child Study Center in 2016. They did that study.
I'd actually like to raise some of the audience questions. And for those that are watching on Facebook Live, we are monitoring the comments and we're looking for questions surrounding this topic. Overall, the Black agenda and raising mental health and self-care as part of what should be a part of that Black agenda. So I want to raise an audience question from Christina Lopes. She states, as a mental health professional, how would you recommend to begin the discussion around the benefit to break down the stigma of engagement in treatment? You can all unmute.
Can you repeat that question for me again? I need to maybe write down, because I feel like it had a lot of parts.
All right. Oh, I see all the pins go up. Yep. As a mental health professional, how would you recommend to begin the discussion around the benefit to break down the stigma of engagement in treatment?
Okay, so basically asking, oh, go ahead.
I wasn't sure you were going to answer the question. You were just asking to repeat the question.
Oh, no, I was going to answer. I just felt like it was a lot. I had to try to put it.
Oh,
Yeah. So I think that, so what I understand the question to be is, how do we break down the stigma of, of mental health in the Black community? Well, I think that we have to normalize it more. We have to create opportunities and create spaces and places for our younger brothers and sisters to be exposed to mental health therapy. We have to make it a part of the family dynamics. We have to make it something that maybe they all participate in, or something that's like right in their face at very earlier ages. And I think that it just comes with raising awareness. I think that what we're doing, or the way that you raise awareness, is not going to be anything overnight. I think anytime awareness has to come about anything, it doesn't happen overnight. It definitely happens over long processes. And I think that we're seeing the fruits of that from people who started mental health movements early, way before we were born. I think that we're seeing the fruits of how people are seeing how important mental health is, and how important it is for us to pay attention to our mental health. And so I think that it's something that happens through all of our work as we raise awareness together, whether you're a mental health professional or not, whether you're a clinician or not, but raising awareness, sharing your own stories about mental health, or your own family stories about your family, or just your own perspective, or if you're going to therapy, maybe be more open about that. But whatever it is, just increasing awareness and normalizing it, definitely normalizing it in our family systems. And so in trying to empower our younger people and even ourselves to break family curses, generational curses, we hear them say, but cycles of trauma are real. And if you don't believe that they're real, just pay attention to your own family and pay attention to your own history with trauma. If you feel like you have had any adverse childhood reaction or any adverse childhood experience, please know that you're not the first in your family to experience that. Mama, grandma, granddaddy, daddy, auntie, somebody has experienced trauma. And so we have to try to break that cycle on our own and realize that we're not alone in that. We're not the only ones who've been traumatized. And so when we do that, I think people will start to feel more at peace and more welcome and more interested in seeking counseling and mental health services.
Can I say something on that too? I love what you just said, first of all, as far as trauma through generations and things of that nature. Terminology that comes to my mind is a systemic trauma and transgenerational, intergenerational trauma, where one who hasn't even experienced the trauma head on kind of experiences as it goes and passes down through and through. So even with our culture, having experienced things of slavery, dealing with a consistent abuse through history, and just the impact that it has had on our ancestor or even our own parents, and just seeing how they've suffered or dealt with it in ways that maybe were lean more towards surviving instead of just focusing on behavioral health. They've done things just to survive and just get past and get through. I feel that as far as dealing with behavioral health and kind of like breaking down the stigma within our communities, as Tiara said, going and just starting from a young age, early intervention constantly proves to be deeply effective. Even coming from a personal perspective, my son, he's on the spectrum, and dealing with autism spectrum disorder, and having it amongst minorities, sometimes it goes overlooked until they become older and actually get evaluated. I and his father had him evaluated from a young age, did early intervention, working with him with his social skills and other things. And still to this day, many people say, wow, he doesn't even seem to be autistic. And it's like you place it in a bubble. But the thing is that it's very unique. But even using that as an example, early intervention is very important. However, what you also find is that many of those in the Black and Brown communities of older age dealing with these things, and they haven't confronted years of trauma, years of abuse, years of just negative interaction with their society. They haven't dealt with it until later, when they found that their social and occupational functioning has become off. And then again, I've said this probably 10 million times, changing the language, because you can't go in there and be like, okay, you need to go to therapy, you need to see a clinician. They're like, what are you trying to say about me? Because they've just grown up in that kind of background when those things were seen as being negative. But rather taking time to hear them out about what it is that they're just so against as far as coming into sessions, kind of making it a relaxed background, asking them, okay, so you come here and your time is useful to me. Your time means something to me. So I don't want you to waste your time at all. I want to know, what is it that you need in this moment? Building from there, and then taking time to kind of probe and dig deeper. I've dealt with those who were dealing with criminal background, criminal history, and they're trying to reintegrate into the community. Tell them they're depressed. They're going to look at you like, what's depression? I'm not depressed. What are you trying to talk to me like that for? But if you talk to them like, hey, listen, I see that, you really, bro, you really trying to go, trying to get what you need to, but I see that you're here, and I feel like there's some things that you might be struggling, and can you talk to me a little bit more about that? And then before you know it, they break it down crying in the office, because it's like, you get me. But it's changing the language, finding something where you can connect with, and not trying to use the jargon so much. And I feel that that's where we can start with a lot of ours in the community, because so much it has been wielded around just trying to do in a certain way, and that's why it hasn't been as effective as we would want it to be. But when you go and you find where you can meet a person where they're at, you can find the best change of all.
Oh, yep, go Sheena.
Yeah, can I say something from the spiritual aspect or from the church aspect? And I'm only saying this because I think a lot of times, again, when we talked about before, how therapy is deemed as, or is demonized. One of the things I want to talk about is, I don't know if anybody follows Dr. Anita Phillips. But that is my girlfriend. Like, that is my homegirl. She don't know it, but I just love her. But so I have something that, God gave me called prayer therapy. And I love to pray, because prayer to me is just that helps me. But I want to talk a little bit about what she said about prayer and what she said about therapy. She said that prayer is a weapon, and then she also said that therapy is a strategy. And I thought that was so powerful, and it was also concise, because when we think about therapy, again, it's demonized, and you're saying, oh, you're crazy. No, it's a strategy to get you from point A to point B. It's to help you get over the bridge. And so I think if we start to break down what therapy is in those words, or that particular language, right? So changing the narrative of what you sitting on a couch and you're crazy. No, that's not what it is. But I love how she talked about how therapy is a strategy. And I think if we start to change the language and start, to help, especially the older generation to understand what therapy is, or they'll say, especially like, our mother generation, there ain't nothing wrong with me. I don't need any healing. And it's like, clearly you do. And so I think we need to start to change that language and to help them to understand that it's just a strategy. It's just a bridge to get you from point A to B. And I think if we start to engage them in that way, then maybe that can be an open door to possibilities of that generation entering into therapy. That's just a thought.
And if I can, I'm sorry, I already talked one time, but y'all, I love these type of conversations. They like speak to my heart and my soul, because mental health is it holds a very special place in my heart, because this is what I've chosen to be my career and what I do. But one thing that I have noticed, so one thing I want to say related to what Shania said, I hope I said your name right, but she mentioned that what we needed was early interventions. And I think that is so true. I think that as a Black community, we don't really do early interventions. We do late interventions. We do, oh, you done flipped out at school, or you done lost your job for the 4th time. Okay, now what's wrong? As opposed to like catching a child who may be explosive very early on and say, okay, we're going to take you to see someone. Now that is something that I think we struggle with as a community, even for other cultures too, because it's not only something that happens in the Black community. I feel like Muslim cultures, Indian cultures, Asian cultures, they all struggle with this, you know, seeing someone, because we all kind of have this idea of what happens in this house stays in this house, and we have that level of secrecy and privacy. But what I have learned and noticed, even in the news, when you see white criminals, when you see them doing something, they always have mental health backgrounds. They always have, oh, this person has been seen by so-and-so for whatever. When it comes to us and, you know, showing us our people who are criminals in the media, we don't have that. But I can guarantee you a lot of the people who are committing these crimes and doing these things have some form of mental health issues. And so I think if early intervention was at play, we would save a lot of you know, issues and a lot of our people from entering into situations that they just otherwise wouldn't be in if they had that early intervention. And then, as Sheena said, I think that changing the language is extremely important. That self-awareness, increasing awareness is huge. And I think the normalization of it all, because for the Black community, we have a lot of us, though there are some people in the Black community who aren't very spiritual, who don't practice a religion, but the large majority of us, church and spirituality is at the core of who we are. And even if you don't practice it now in your adult years, you probably grew up in church, or you had an auntie who took you to church when your mom or your grandma didn't take you, but you have some affiliation to church. And I think that there is this idea of therapy and needing to seek help is demonized. And so I think raising the awareness and normalizing it. And so having more people in the faith community like Dr. Anita to come out and say therapy is great. You know, it is a strategy. It's something that you can use in your favor. It's something that can help you. And the way that I like to look at it is therapy is something that can help you know what to pray about. Therapy helps you to put words to your issues. If you don't go to therapy and talk with people and understand what an issue is, how do you pray about it? And so your prayers are kind of borderline. They're kind of surface level, because you're not really being able to say, Lord, please help me with my thoughts. Help me pull me out of these sunken places or these very dark places when I get really sad. We don't learn that language because we're not tapping into what the issues really are. So I think I think therapy helps us to put words to our symptoms, and prayer helps us to kind of fight against them in a way that helps us to address them, but also learn, heal, and grow from them so that we can live very fruitful lives.
Can I say more? So this is so good. Sorry, so good. Did you figure this out?
Malika.
You want to go? Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, you can go ahead and I'll go after you, Sheena. It's fine.
Okay. This is just really good because I just love this type of this stuff. So one of the things I think also so important about therapy, and I always even talk to like my students about this, especially when I see some of them like exhibiting like different behaviors. And I say, you know, you want to stop it now, especially in your teenage years, because if you don't deal with things in your teenage years, you're going to bring that into adulthood, right? And so I asked my students this. I said, have you ever seen a 40-year-old or 50-year-old act like a 16-year-old? And they're like, yeah, you know. And I'm like, because their growth was stunted because of something that happened in those years. And so therapy would help that, right? And so I don't necessarily say that to them, but I just tell them that, you know, some behaviors you may want to like try to check or correct right now, because you don't want to bring those habits into your adulthood. Or if they're not corrected, you're going to see those patterns and you're going to be like that 50-year-old that acts like that 15-year-old because they never got past that hurt or that pain. And so when they look at me, they're like, what was I just at? And I'm like, yeah. And I think that's something that we also need to enlighten our community about, because we exhibit behaviors that we are unaware of, because it's so rooted in our subconscious that we're not even aware of what we're doing, right? It's in our shadows. And so I think it's so important to like literally, you know, address these issues and those aspects of, you know, let's not cover it up with shouting. Let's not cover it up with, you know, going to church 7 days a week. Can we like get to the core of what's actually going on the inside. And so I am so passionate about that when it comes to spirituality and therapy, because a lot of us are so sick, and I'm saying us, right? Because I don't want to say you, and people get offended, and I'm saying us because we're in it together. And so I am just so passionate, and I just pray that somebody will take the courage, even if they're older, take the courage to literally look on the inside and to ask God to see, God, what is it that I need to change? What I need to change this narrative now so that my children won't pick up these habits. And I think it's much bigger than us. It's about the generation that's coming before us. And I think that's why it's so important to really stress this aspect of mental health so we don't keep passing it on to our children. And so that's all I got to say.
So I think psychoeducation is a huge factor when looking at stigmatizations within the Black community as it relates to mental health. So from the top, I'm looking at it from a top-down approach within the family dynamic. When dealing with stigmatizations, we as adults, as parents, as caretakers, shape the ways in which our children view life, circumstances, and most importantly, mental health. So I think if we were to educate ourselves as adults, and even those that may not have been brought up in a household where mental health was something that was accepted, once we are able to become educated and know that we are not our symptoms, we may have a symptom, we may have an illness or a diagnosis, but we are not that, then we can be able to embrace the resources that are within our community to be able to help shape and mold us into that which we are capable of being. So that was really basically what I wanted to say.
Great. There are so many questions that have just popped up all at once. So here we go. Can someone speak to how behaviors presented by our youth get criminalized, especially in our schools?
My Lord. That's a big one.
Can you repeat that question, please?
Am I me? Yep. Can someone speak to how behaviors presented by our youth get criminalized, especially in our schools?
Behaviors by our youth get criminalized, especially in the schools. I'm going to try to answer that question the best way I can. Dealing with, I've done in-home services for years, working between ICAPS and other programs. And as far as youth, and I'm guessing they're talking about minorities being the topic of discussion, I truly feel that from my experience, many times when it comes down to certain behaviors being exhibited, it's sad to say, but it'll be much quickly picked up by a child who is of the Black or brown influence versus the majority or white influence. And I don't feel that it's always done purposely, but it's just become such a trend and something that is being so used to that that's a big reason why I feel many of us parents, before our children go out, if they're of age where they can really comprehend, tell them be on your best behavior. Because I'm not there and you're representing me. So pull it together and stay in line. And I don't want to hear any phone calls from the school. And that's why when we go to the school, we come down a little bit harder on our kids. And not because, they're any worse or whatever, but we also understand the implications that come with being toned like this and not being able to make it go away. I feel that once the youth may go into the school and they have a certain behavior, when they're being stopped or being reprimanded, it can be the way it's being addressed. It could be in a way that they become offensive, or it might be a little bit harsh, maybe feeling that it's much worse than what the actual behavior is, and they might question it, but because they're questioning authority, or doing something to that extent, it's like they're reprimanded even more. So they may act out even more because of the fact that they're trying to defend themselves and they don't feel anyone is hearing them. So those might be some of the things that attribute to their behavior becoming, as that question was put, criminalized. It's not so much saying that the kid is trying to be that, but neither is it also condoning the behavior itself. But it's just that we're really basically dealing with systemic kind of behaviors and like things that are taken and misrepresented. And that's why it's so important for us to have more advocates within the school to help our Black and brown youth as well.
Can I go? All right, so as an educator, a lot of people ask me, so this is a really good question. Well, you work with high school students. You're not scared? I'm like, absolutely not. Well, that's because, you know, that's a whole nother story. But one of the things that I display in my classroom, what I call social emotional lessons. So, right, so incorporating, so I think what it has to start with also is the educator, right, and educating them on how to deal with Black and brown kids, right? So that's number one. Also, how you create your classroom environment, right? And so the environment is very important when it comes to children. And so, and I'm hoping I'm answering the question to the best of my ability, but I think some of these are ways in which we can actually shift the narrative of kids being criminalized, because oftentimes kids who are disrupted in another class is not disrupted in my class. And so I think sometimes is the environment in which that the educator presents in their classroom. Number one, a level of respect, right? And so if you are dishing out respect to a youth, they're going to give you respect back. If you are transparent and open with them, they're going to be transparent and open with you. Now, I'm not saying this is 100%, but this is more so like on the spectrum of like 85%. Majority of my students I have no issues with. And I think it starts with the educator and the educator also understanding them as a person, because they just want to be heard. Not only that, they also want to know that someone cares. And so a lot of times when they're deemed as criminalized, all they're doing is they're acting out, because at home, there's so much pain. And so how do they now come to an environment that seems like pain? So they're going to act out in that particular environment. So I think environment is important. And there was one more thing, education. Oh, so one of the things I even do in my classroom is at the beginning of every class, I do like a 2-minute how are you? You know, like, you know, what's up? What's going on? And that gives that level of engagement and voice. And so, and not only that, like there are some reprimands. So like if students do act out, I will say this much, because I definitely know that there is a school to prison pipeline that's in place. Okay. So I'm very aware of that. Right. So again, it comes down to the education. And honestly, I don't really write my students up. I give them a, 1, 2, 3, type of strike out. You skip my class one time, I'm not going to say something. 2, I'm going to call you out in the hallway and, and check them. And so again, it's just having that level of rapport with students. And I think that most educators, especially that don't necessarily look like us, they deem them as criminalized because they don't understand their environment in which they come from. And so I just think that it comes down to educating the educator and helping them to understand like the social emotional learning and helping them to understand the level of respect so that you won't demonize them as criminals. I don't lock up my stuff. Everybody's like, you don't lock your stuff up? No, I'll leave my cell phone out. I dare them to try to do that. And again, it's that level of respect. It's just like, it's like Big Mama, like, like the grandmothers, you're not going to steal from your grandmother. Right. And so it boils down to having that level of respect and teaching the educators how to deal with our Black and brown children.
So I would say when looking at, from an educator and a mental health provider standpoint, I would say that in looking at decriminalizing the behaviors of our Black and brown children. I believe it really starts with education, right? And not so much with education from the child's standpoint, but more so from the individuals that are surrounding that child, particularly law enforcement, right? So when we look at law enforcement, I feel that a lot of times when they're engaging with our youth, they're not using de-escalation tactics. I find a lot of times that they are doing and saying things that are escalating the situation as opposed to de-escalating, which further, which further influences the preconceived notions that individuals have already toward our youth, right? So I think it's an educational, I think cultural competency is definitely a huge factor when looking at building police relations within the community, and also educating those who are come in contact with our youth on a day-to-day basis, because we look at a child and we see the ways in which they may disengage. We see the ways in which they might be flip at the lip. We see all of the external factors, but we don't know what's going on internally. We don't know what they have had to endure prior to leaving their homes, and the ways in which they may be treated within their homes, and the areas in which they may lack resources. Their children that may come to school hungry and may not, depending on where they are, whether they're in school within an institution that is economically advanced, where maybe they don't have lunch programs for those young people that may not necessarily be able to afford breakfast, or just certain things that they have within school systems that we just look at the external, and we don't always take into account what's going on internally. So I believe in decriminalizing the offenses of our youth really has to come from a place, matters of the heart. And I think a lot of times people actually fear Black and brown skin. And we are human. We're not animals. We hurt just like you hurt. And because we are seen as both, superwoman and supermen, and we've had to endure so much, I think people don't realize that even the muscle that we've developed, we sometimes become weak and we become tired, right? So I think that it really is an educational component that needs to come into existence from a multidimensional perspective. And our youth also need to feel that, because I think children get a sense of the individuals who genuinely care. And because I forgot what your name is, Sheena, as an educator, they know that you care. And they can also sense when someone really doesn't care, they sense that. So that's my little 2 cents.
Yeah. I thought that was a great question. I think that everyone answered that question really well. And I just want to throw in, I know you said you threw in your 2 cents, Malika, but I just want to throw mine in there, maybe my 1 cent, because y'all did a great job. I throw my 1 cent in. Now, I'm not an educator, but I do have experience working with adolescents and even younger kids too. But some of the things that I listened to you all say as you shared, and these are the things that I kind of wrote down, but I wrote down rapport, outlets, understanding, and cultural competency. And I'll kind of go through, not all of them, but just some of them, just to touch on what I meant when I wrote those things down. So when I hear someone say a child, our youth being criminalized, I immediately think of that angry, or maybe very passionate, maybe loud and boisterous, maybe to some people very rude, disrespectful, maybe even aggressive child or adolescent. I think of those type of children. And I think that while though some kids may be just kind of be that way, I think that there are a lot of other kids that they are coming to school exhibiting behavior related to their environment at home. So a lot of times kids aren't coming to school acting out and just kind of flipping out or being disrespectful or using profanity or just doing things that they know that they shouldn't be doing. Kids do have a moral compass. As much as we may not think that they do, they have a moral compass, and they are aware when they're doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. But if they're coming to school projecting these type of behaviors, it's probably because there's something going on at home that nobody is taking the time to get to the bottom of. And so this is why I think it's really important for there to be school social workers, and for there to be teachers in the school system that actually want to be there, people who are actually going to care about kids. Because I believe that if you have people in the classroom that have cultural competency, and it doesn't mean that you have to look like the child that you're teaching, but at least have some awareness that when this child yells or when they are being a little aggressive or rude, it's not because they're being, what is the word? It's not because they're being extremely explosive or impulsive or that they're being a threat to you. It could just be that that's how they're expressing themselves. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is secondary to something else. So that means this child could probably be hurt. They could be sad. They could be feeling depressed. They could be having all these things that are going on, but we never get to understand what that initial issue is, because we're only focused on the anger. We're only focused on writing the child up, send them to the office, get them suspended. That's all we're focusing on, and the cycle continues. But if we try to peel back the skin a little bit and peel back the onion layers, we'll probably start to understand that this child probably hasn't had a home cooked meal in the last 2 weeks. When they come to school, this is the only meal that they eat. When this child go home, they have to be there without their mom or without their dad. But there's so many things that we miss because we only focus on the child's behavior and not maybe the cause or what's causing them to behave that way. So I think that is cultural competency and that lack of understanding. And I think just for children or adolescents or youth not really knowing how to fully express themselves, but at the same time, not having the space and place to actually express themselves. And so I feel like a lot of times in the school system, kids are they're like kind of, okay, we're here for 8 hours out of the day or more, and I'm supposed to sit here and behave when I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get home, or I got to think about my walk home. Is it going to be safe? Am I going to be safe? I got to think about all of this stuff while I'm expected to be this noble student. No. So I think that it's important for us to create outlets for students to be able to share and to be able to talk about things. And it doesn't mean it has to be in the classroom, but a school social worker or having those teachers like Sheena, I'm sure your students probably come to you and share lots of different things with you. And I think that although that can be very taxing for you, I think that you as an educator and other educators being able to have resources. So if you can't help a child with their emotional issues, you can say, hey, thank you for sharing this with me. Go talk to so-and-so, the school social worker, or, have some other resources in place where the child can go and talk about things and it be confidential and it be someone that they can trust. So I know that was a long-winded way, but I tried. 1 cent, maybe 10 cents.
No. And I was also, so the other thing I'm going to say this, and I hope I don't get dinged for this, but I work in an urban education school system, so I'll say that. And I'll say this, we do not have social workers. Yes. So, but I do so for things that I can't handle. So because for things I cannot handle, I revert them. You go to your guidance counselor. Sometimes if it's the grief, if there's something out of my spectrum, you go to your guidance counselor. And so that's the thing that I'm thinking about, like, how can we get more mental health, in our school system? And I'm in a large high school. Like, we have about 2,000 students. And so, and I'm in an urban education. And we do not have social workers. And so that's one of the things that's like, that weighs on me. Yes, I'm ordained, but my students do not know. Some of them may, if I'm close with them, they know that I'm ordained, and I'm a youth pastor. So I have that element, but I will say to them, I'm not a therapist, right? But I can guide you. So, my job is to help guide you spiritually, and I can do that. But I will not I'm not going to play God, number one, and I'm not going to play your therapist. I'm just here to help be that support and be part of your village. And that's kind of how I word it. I'm part of the village because I had a village to help me get out of my stuff as a teenager. And so I think that is why it's so important to have, teachers who are culturally competent. And, teaching is my second career. And so, I was led into teaching. And so for me, I'm like, that's why I'm an advocate. I talk to Chaz all the time. I am an advocate for just mental health and just our youth, because I can see how one person can change a trajectory of a student's life. being part of that village in spite of their background. And I think that is so important to just educate even our educators on like mental health, or have mental health trainings, so that they're just aware and they're not naive, and they're not, they don't isolate, or they, that they're just really aware of what's going on with our youth. I think cultural competency is so important, and also infusing that social emotional behavior within the classroom as well, I think is important. And so because I bring some other spiritual practice with me, I kind of infuse it so that the students are stabilized within the classroom, because it's not just about learning. Like you said before, I believe, when I think about Maslow, hierarchy of needs, right? That's the basic. If you don't have the basic, how are you going to learn? Like, if you don't have the basic, and so I wholeheartedly agree with you all. And I'm just so grateful to be on this panel with each and every one of you.
So there is so much that we have not covered, but I'm not going to torture us.
We need a part two.
If we agree, okay, it looks like everybody agrees. There's a lot we didn't cover, but I think this is a good place to take a pivot that Sheena mentioned, and it's about, again, the context of this is about a Black agenda. For me, as a politician and one who's in government, who's a former educator and so on, and actually I manage multiple YMCAs right now. So with pre-K and all the way up to senior care and so on. What is it that we should be demanding of our government as citizens? You all are not speaking as employees of wherever you work or whatever that dynamic might be. So I'm putting that disclaimer out again in case somebody tries, whatever. As a citizen, you have a right, you pay taxes. What should we be putting pen to paper? And this is how we're going to close out. What should we put on pen to paper on our agenda as a community, as in order to carry out everything that we have talked about and all the other things we haven't even gotten to thus far? And once you do that, and take your time, there's no limit on that. Feel free to drop your social media handles and ways that folks can contact you on your various platforms. So anyone can start.
I can just start, just to pivot off of like what I just said. I think I would demand how we can write into policy more mental health. I said mental health professionals in all schools, not just some schools. I think just like, there should be teachers and principals, I think there should be mental health professional, and not just school counselors, but I think that there should be a level, either a licensed professional counselor or a social worker. And I would definitely say social worker, because a social worker looks at the whole person versus maybe an LPC looks at, and I could be wrong, looks more so for mental health, but I was thinking more so more social workers within the school system because of what they do. And I could be wrong, but that's what I'm sensing, having more social workers within the school systems.
I just wanted to speak about that because, I'm an LPC, but we do look at the whole person, by the way, but we just tend to be very clinical as far as our approach, because, we don't want to live by the label, and we don't live by the label, but we do understand, as far as the DSM-5 being a backbone of understanding certain behaviors, that's an entryway. Truth be told, I feel that what we need to put pen to paper about is money. And with that money, talking about what we tend to do with that money. Because you talked about, licensed professional workers, you need more resources. When it comes down to the dollars drive decisions, and you need money to go ahead and do that. So they can provide the funding. What will happen is, if we ask them also for, hey, we need more of these people, we need more of that people, they can ask people to volunteer their time Or they can, pick out, okay, people live here and there, and they may be licensed and they may have this, but you need trainings to make sure people are competent enough so that liabilities can be decreased, things like that. All of that takes funding. So we have to first ask about, okay, we need the increase in funding, and then the why of the increase in funding. Then we need to provide also, okay, who is it that we can see about channeling or having come in who would want to do the trainings? You have people who want to actually be educated in terms of these different places, but they don't have the money to do it. I put myself through school. I had to. I didn't have the luxury of parents who were able to do it as much as they wanted to. They just weren't in that position. But that stopped me? Thank God not. But it was a matter of motivation and a lot of blessings, thank the Lord. So it will definitely take funding and us being able to also put to paper about what we plan to do with that, and making the plan not only just sound good, but showing some of the work behind it. Because sometimes they'll ask people on higher authority, will ask about, okay, so what have you done to try it? Starting out with our funding from our own, and basically making sure that we talk to each other, communicate these needs, and showing how it can help out Maslow hierarchy of needs, how it all connects, so that way people can be more open to behavioral health services and increasing in these areas which lack. So I feel that's the bigger need right there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it is super important that that politicians and people who make laws and policies and who are advocating on our behalf, that they're having these conversations. And I don't know where the conversation starts or how it starts. I mean, it starts with platforms like this, but at larger levels, I think having town halls and city hall meetings and opening polls and giving people in the community opportunities to weigh in on the needs, especially for educators like Sheena, who's in school systems or school districts that don't have the luxury of having a school social worker, and having opportunities for kids to actually have the outlet and resource in school, so that they can talk with people. And I think even beyond the education, just having those community resources at a larger level too. So I think having the conversations and getting the funding, for me, I think that those are the two biggest. And I don't know that one of them has to happen before the other. In my mind, they can all happen at the same time. But I do understand that there's always a method to the madness. And so making policy and being able to grant funds doesn't just work like that. And there has to be kind of some backing and some research and some further conversations before it actually makes sense for people. As unfortunate as that is, I do understand that that's usually how it works, especially working for Congress. So I definitely understand that. But I think if I had to surmise what I'm trying to say to kind of wrap it up, I would say funding and the conversations, in whichever way that happens, it just needs to be happening. Conversations and the money. And I'm sorry, are we supposed to drop our social media handle, or are we waiting to the end? Go ahead.
Well, you could, and I must admit, there is a good question in the hopper. I just feel like we should address it
Okay.
before we end it. So we'll give the social media handles at the end.
Okay.
We'll let Malika go next.
Okay.
So what I wanted to say is, when looking at, the Pledge of Allegiance, I think that we have these mantras that our country has stood by for quite some time. And in reciting that mantra, the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So when thinking about justice, we think about equality. We need to become a unified body, right? And if we're going to, invoke change within the Black community and obtaining equal rights and having access to resources that are, readily made available to, our counterparts of other nationalities, particularly Caucasians, we need to ensure that, there is an equality in terms of the resources that are made available. And I think that is a really good way in starting to really honor that which we chant you know, the ways in which our country has created a foundation for the ways in which we are to conduct ourselves within, you know, within government, within our society, within our communities, within our homes, right? So we have to be indivisible regardless of color, right? But we're a long ways from that. But we also need to come together collectively, because as much as I am against police brutality, I am also against Black on Black crime. And we have to learn to love on one another and to really be a unified body in the realm of our race and our nationality, and then also, you know, joining in with other races that are in high-powered positions, right? And really, we're getting ready to have to, within New York, June 23rd, we will be voting, right? So we need to make sure that we're learning about the candidates in which we are voting for and exercising our rights to vote. So these are all ways in which we can become more active, right? And then help to obtain the rights in which we deserve.
Chaz, I'm not sure what's going on with your video there, but okay.
Okay, so basically I wanted to touch on Christina's question. So her question was for young children, African-American children, why are they so quick to being identified with special needs or being diagnosed? Correct? Is that correct? Can you hear me? Oh my gosh. Back to meeting. Hold on.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think you said that. Yeah, is everyone good with it? We see it,
I
right?
can hear you.
Yeah, and we can see it too in the chat box. Okay, now you're muted again, Chaz. There you go.
Okay, so I wanted to just basically go back to her question. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can hear you. Your screen is still, but we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, basically I wanted to just look at her question and then just kind of touch on her question because it's kind of loaded.
Okay, let's read it.
Okay, so her question, you want me to read it out loud?
Yes.
Okay, so her question says, would really enjoy a conversation on our young children being so quick to be diagnosed and identified as needing special education and medication prescription. We need educators who are willing to think outside of the box and engaging young children when they don't fit the easy mold. Why are so many of our children labeled?
Can I answer that?
Wow.
So
Ooh.
like talk about it really quickly. Just from the perspective of yes, a lot of our children are labeled, and immediately the psychiatrist wants to put them on Ritalin or other medications for like ADHD. In my opinion, I'm not big into pushing medicine at all. I'm more so big into therapy, talking to the parents, just kind of like just trying to see what's going on in the home and what are the family dynamics like. A lot of times, like we have stated tonight on this Zoom call, is a lot of how children just express themselves in the classroom. A lot of it has to do with what's going on in the home. That child may be acting out because they come from like a single parent household and there's no dad in the home, and that boy, that African American kindergartner, may be acting out because he misses his dad, or he's maybe in the classroom seeing other students with a dad and he's like, I don't have a dad. So he's acting out at home, he's acting out in school. There could also be issues with like, no food in the house, or just like lack of funding, that mom has like no access to certain, resources. So, I do not feel that, like I said, I don't feel that kids should be labeled as being special ed just because there may be like a lot of trauma that they're dealing with in the home. What needs to be done, I feel, is that, if I was a teacher, what I would try to do is just to sit down with the mom and just talk to her and just see like what her resources are, and if she has family and like other supports, and kind of just tap into what her supports are, instead of like the school immediately labeling her child as special ed and saying, you know, that child needs to be put on medication. So I would just say, just kind of like just going directly to the parent and just talking and just asking, hey, what do you need? What basically are you looking for? What do you need help with? To be able to help you with maybe parenting. Maybe that mom doesn't even know how to parent her child effectively, and maybe that could be another reason why her son or daughter is acting out in the classroom, because maybe she needs some parenting classes. So then that could be another thing that, you know, as the teacher, we could help mom tap into getting some type of parenting classes. So there could be many, you know, different reasons.
Yeah.
Can I? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm gonna go after you.
I was gonna say, just to quickly piggyback off of that, Chaz, I think you brought out a lot of great points. Just having, again, dealt with this countless times, important to look at the family dynamic, because some of them may not even have parents. Some of them have foster parents. Some of them have grandparents or whatever have you. So looking at the family dynamic, informing the parents of their rights if they are the guardians, the full guardians of the child, because what happens is if you let the school just adopt the child, they'll do whatever it is that's, sad to say, maybe much more convenient and affordable. And sometimes quickly saying, okay, you just need to be referred, takes the intensity off of the educator who is like trying to deal with not only that child, but probably 50 other children who are just like him or her. Giving the training to the educators as well as how to intervene appropriately. And then once informing the parents and finding out the family dynamic, as much as they'll probably let on to you about, and also finding out background, what's going on at home. Someone brought that up earlier. And also looking at their school patterns, addressing it from there and putting in a plan. That's super important, just to make sure that the kiddo can be along the like straight lines. And then sometimes you have it where they actually may need a psychiatric evaluation, a full biopsychosocial, extremely important, very helpful, and it's a little bit more intense. Sometimes they do need medication management because there's something medically underlying going on that was never fully assessed, and having that conversation again with the guardian and with the school. But important thing, always keep the parent well informed, because once you lose that, the child can come quickly labeled, the family is uninformed, and it's like confusion happens and the kiddo really never gets the treatment that they deserve.
So I think that it's important for us to take away the negative stigmatization of special education, right? Because we know that within special education, there are additional resources that are available, made readily available for children with educational needs that may vary in comparison to mainstream classrooms. However, when also thinking about children that are categorized as being or as needing special education, right? And it's done in a way that really takes away from the needs of that particular child. And they're either misdiagnosing our children and then categorizing them. That is something that definitely needs to be looked into. I think oftentimes we have educators that are not culturally competent, and I know we've had that term that has come up quite a lot during our discourse here tonight, but we have educators that lack empathy and apathy and patience and understanding, right? And they just want to get that child who is a thorn in their side out of their classroom by any means necessary. So then they make recommendations as to how that particular child needs to have an additional educational plan and having them removed from the classroom as a whole. So I think, we do need to become sensitive to the needs of the children that are within classrooms and that meet with their psychologists to be able to really look beyond the external, right? And have conversations, have discourse, try to establish the relationships so that you can get that respect from that child that it is that you desire, instead of reporting them. Sometimes children, they look for negative reinforcement just as well as some children may look for positive reinforcement. So that child that may be calling out or having conversation may be neglected at home, and you're the only person that pays them attention. And the more they act out, the more attention you give them, but they're not realizing that it's negative attention when really they need to be seeking positive reinforcement. So I think that it's very, very important for us to be able to establish relationships beyond, because we're no longer dealing with children that the children are experiencing issues that, I know nothing is new under the sun, but they're experiencing issues that are difficult for adults to deal with. And we're expecting them to go into a classroom and learning environment and posture and position themselves and be okay, and they have things going on internally, right? So it's very important that relationship and rapport is developed amongst the educator and the student, right? And that we are not so quick to diagnose, that we look beyond the surface, and we really try to establish a relationship with our young people.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I can go after you.
Okay, so I'm going to push the envelope a little bit, and I might get some backlash for this because I am an educator, right? And so because the part of the question was we need more educators who want to think outside the box, which I definitely understand. However, there are some parents, okay, and I'm only saying this from my own personal experience, there are some parents who push IEPs. Okay, so let's be clear. Sometimes it's not the educator, it is the parent. And here's why, because they want that check. I'm gonna let that sink in for a second. Okay. So sometimes because money is associated with the IEPs, a lot of parents, they push IEPs when some of their students, their kids, they don't need IEPs. They just need some behavioral management. Period. And so I'm kind of speaking on the other side of things, and I'm seeing it from a high school level. I'm not necessarily talking more so like early education, because that's not really my realm, but I'm just basically telling you what I see based on things I've saw, from my experience of what I've seen. There's a lot of parents who push the IEPs because that IEP is associated with a check. So I'm just going to leave it right there.
All right. So I have a couple of things that I think what everybody said was amazing, but I'm going to start. I wrote a little list, just like 4 points. Don't think that I'm like going crazy over here. Just like 4 points. So I'm just going to say this because I didn't hear any, I wanted to maybe take it at a different approach. I think that for educators, you got to develop patience. I think whenever I think of any type of work where it comes to the well-being of a person, whether it's a mental health therapist, whether it's a police officer, whether it's an educator or a doctor, and I think of it in this way: if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. And I feel like for a lot of times with educators, with police officers, with anybody, those jobs can be really stressful, and they can take a lot of patience. And so I think that for some people, you need to develop patience and understanding that your role as an educator is not a one-size-fits-all position. And because you have little Susie over here who seems calm and does her work, and then you have little Nikki, and Nikki is like loud and boisterous and fun and like doesn't seem to focus as much on her work, it doesn't mean that she is less able to do her work as Susie is. It just means that she has a different way of approaching her work. And so I think that the way that you approach little Susie does not mirror the way that you approach Nikki, because Nikki's way that she needs discipline is going to be different from Susie's. I think, did I say Susie? I think we'll go with Susie. I think I said Susie or whatever I said. It's just going to be different. And so I think that there needs to be a level of patience. And I think that understanding for educators that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And with that being said, I think that it's important for us to understand that no kids are the same. So you have no two kids in your classroom is going to be the same. And again, this is coming from someone who is not an educator, so I can understand that it can be really difficult if you have multiple students who may be a bit difficult to deal with. But no two kids are the same. And I read a book when I was in grad school. It was required of me to read by one of my instructors. And it was a book that kind of challenged normal. And it kind of got us, I cannot remember the name. And if you all saw me looking at my phone, I was trying to find the book so I can say it. I could not find the name of it. It's been like 4 years ago or 5. But I was trying to find the name of the book. And in the book, it kind of went after Big Pharma. And it talked about how ADHD and ADD became this big thing, and every child, if they acted out in class, they were diagnosed with either ADD or ADHD, so that Big Pharma could profit off of the funding or getting the medication and prescriptions. And so money is always a big part of labeling and wanting kids to, and people period, to take medication. And so I think that us being able to challenge that normal does not exist, although we feel that normal does not exist. Myself, me, and Malika, we may have some similarities, but we're not going to believe that the same things are normal. And I think that we have to be able to address and acknowledge that in the classroom, that no two children in the classroom is going to be the same, and normalcy for one child is going to be different from the normalcy of the other child. And so I think that we have to recognize, again, that no two kids are going to be the same, and so we have to have different approaches to different children. And I think that the intervention for children has to look different. And I think being able to have conversations and have IEPs and conversations like IEPs to kind of get to the issue, root cause, and understand and explore what children need, I think that those are important, and those are forms of intervention. And I think if we couple this understanding or group together this understanding that none of your two students are going to be the same, there's no sense of normalcy, if that makes sense, and having a level of patience where we can intervene and kind of throw ourselves into the work with the children and partner with parents and partner with other people and resources in the school system or with our administrators, and just having that intervention and patience. And I think if we did that, then we may be able to see a less amount of labels for children, and we will be able to understand them better and teach them based off of their personality. So this question is very loaded, and it makes me want to go all different places, but I think that it's important for us to understand a child's personality to a certain degree and try to teach them based off of their understanding and the way that they learn.
Can I just quickly say something? Because I'm thinking about the whole thing as far as bringing clarity about the IEP and the check. I think it's turned to the parents afterwards saying, okay, now we're about to find out about your disabilities and signing up with the government and doing all that. Just to clarify, because I'm put it out there, my son's on the IEP and I ain't getting no money. No money. In fact, I got to chase some teachers down, make sure they follow the IEP so I can have some peace and stability at home and everyone can be on one page. So just to bring clarity to that, it's for those people who want to abuse the system in terms of it. But as far as IEPs are concerned, I feel that, and I'm sure all the panelists can agree, they can be very beneficial for those who can follow along because they provide services to the children, not only like within the classroom, but things that parents can use in the home to help address whatever behaviors. And of course, it depends upon the child's developmental level. And I find that too, that's very helpful for children who are parents of, or rather parents who are children of parents who are parents of minorities, to help them understand how to more effectively work with their children. But of course, it's important to have that conversation of what it is that they feel that they might lack in or may not be really up to par with, may need more understanding. And because this is sometimes new to a lot of parents, they're like, well, this wasn't going on when I was a kid. Like, what's the matter with him or what's the matter with her? Just hurry up and get better. No, it don't work like that. We're in a whole nother day and age, and we need to be able to speak with our kids because we're growing in an age where they're growing much smarter or getting exposed to much more than what they can actually come and just comprehend and take in. And then they're learning from different resources, and they're not really being able to hone their skills. So it needs to start within the home. And educators, we need to be able to be bold enough, but be smart enough as far as how we go ahead and intervene. And being, good reporters about that, like being able to talk and educate and communicate amongst different providers. So strengthening the community in that way.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. And again, I'm just talking based on what I've seen and hear. So I just want to clarify that. Okay, let me say that. But there are a lot. I'm going to say it again based on where I am. There are a lot of parents who have IEPs. I mean, who want to place their student on IEP because they know how to. I'm glad you said it because they know how to work the system.
Right.
And it's not always the teacher that puts the student on. I think there's this misconception, right? That is the teacher that places the students on the IEPs, and that's false. There's a whole team. When it comes to like putting a student, there's a whole process and paperwork. It's not just about putting a student on IEP. No, students have to go to a psychologist. They have to go to a sit team. Like there's a whole system. So it's not saying, oh, the educator. So now I'm taking up for educators because I think sometimes, the blame is placed on the educator, and that's not the truth. Sometimes the educator might say, I think there's something wrong with Tim or little Johnny, and I think this should be addressed. And I'm a teacher, and because I'm caring, like, for example, I have a student who he has no type of IEP or anything, but I know there's something signaling me and saying there's something wrong with him in the sense of like he needs a little more help. I'm willing to help, but I'm also aware of, okay, I'm not going to label him, but I'll say, hey, why don't you all do a little bit more, testing just to see where he might be so I can help him so he won't be brushed under the table. And because, for example, if someone is dyslexic, right, their parents might not advocate for them, but here's a teacher who wants to advocate for them because guess what? I want to make sure that you graduate and that you can read and you can write. Okay, sometimes it's not about labeling. Again, I'm talking from like a high school teacher perspective, not necessarily from like early childhood education. I'm talking about from more so like, students who literally got this promoted and teachers didn't care. And I'm noticing, and I'm like, reached out to the guys, I think you should check this child because this child is exhibiting X, Y, and Z. I'm not labeling them, but I'm seeing patterns or I clarify a question, or I'll do one-on-ones. And when I'm doing that one-on-one, there is something there. By the time they get to the high school level, I mean, there's things that they should already know, right? And so I'm saying to them, okay, maybe you need to look at this particular child. So I think sometimes, there's that misunderstanding. And I think that it's important to sit down with the whole team and the whole picture. A teacher can't just put a student on IEP. That's not how it works. It's a whole team system. Like there's a whole system to it. And students even have to go to a psychologist, to actually get diagnosed as well. So it's not just the educator or that teacher. So I just want to clarify that.
Right. It's a PPT meeting that has to come into place before any of that, and the parent has to write. There's a whole process. It's not the teacher puts on IEP. They don't even have the authority to do that. It's a whole legal documentation thing, and that those resources can be found on education websites. It's a whole legal resource for that.
Right. So I can't think of it all. My brain is not there right now, but there's a whole process. And the special education is so broad. So you have, like, again, you have your 504s and you have your IEPs. 504, can be medical, right? Somebody might have a kidney failure or somebody, or somebody's diabetic. Those are more like, 504 plans, or someone is ADHD. Again, there's some blur areas within that. And then you have your IEPs, and there's like these litany of things within IEPs. Maybe somebody's, blind, like, visually impaired, or maybe somebody can't hear. That's all part of the IEPs, right? And so we can't just say we label our children. And again, there's a whole process for students to get on these IEPs.
So I don't know if I could just chime in, and I actually agree with each and every one of you. I think you guys have definitely shed some light from different perspectives that may not have been taken into account. However, coming from a predominantly white neighborhood, Mamaroneck, New York, where the checks in which you know, people of different socioeconomic statuses. And you said that you teach in, you know, areas that are, that you teach in an urban area where the families may actually need that check that comes with, along with being on an IEP. That's something from the community in which I grew up in, made them, you know, never mind, right? So what I found is that the children that were of African American descent, or that were minorities of Hispanic background, the educators, and when I say educators, I'm not talking about individuals that were in the classroom teaching. I'm talking about from the perspective of the network that surrounds the child, so which includes the psychologist, you know, the teacher, all of the individuals that would come in to validate or, you know, put into existence the IEP plan. So just in taking into account that depending where in which it is that you teach, where it is that you are, I think that, you know, there are different perspectives. And I know that you said that there's a system, but like we all know that there are certain steps within the system that are sometimes missed, right? And that depending on what kind of community you come from, or what your nationality is, or what the background, there's certain emphasis that is placed on certain portions of that system and how things get approved. And I actually learned something today because I was unaware, and I don't know when this came into existence, but I was unaware that families actually receive compensation for IEPs. That is not something that I was aware of until today. But I know growing up in the community in which I lived, and those that were categorized as needing IEPs, at that particular time, I don't believe that there was any sort of compensation behind that. So that's something that may have come into existence. I don't know if you could speak to when it actually was, but I think that's a great point. But I just would like for us to be able to broaden our perspective and our awareness that although there are systems, right, that are put in place, we, Black Lives Matter, African Americans, are witness to the fact that although there is a system, that the system is not actually executed the way it should be. And that we ought to push the envelope relative to ensuring that that particular system is executed in a way that brings healing, right? Brings education, psychoeducation. It brings all of the resources that are needed to be able to empower our children.
Chaz?
Sorry, I had went away a few minutes ago. I was looking at some of the data and the statistics, because Christina, she had raised a question about what is the percentage of African Americans that make up, African American students that make up the special education, like for the data for that. So according to the New Haven Register, specifically to Connecticut, it says that 13% of the student population is Black African Americans. And out of that, 16.3% of those students are identified as like receiving special education services. On the other hand, when looking at for Caucasians, it says that the state school population is about 61% white, but 58.3% of those are identified as having a like receiving special education services. So that's to answer that question.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I was attempting to wrap up, and then we entered. That was a great question and a great dialogue. We all agreed to a part 2, and I promise it won't be as long. So everyone that's in the chat, I want you to grab your question and keep your question. We can probably start where we left off once we get a date and a time and so on. And I'm going to tell you, there's some comments here that are just like phenomenal. A lot of educators and social workers, psychologists have been tagged to this, and they said this conversation needs to be recorded and used for professional trainings. The level of the conversation was just very engaging. It's a lot of great feedback. So I want to give everyone an opportunity to provide your social media handles for folks that may have follow-up questions. And we will wrap up part 2 of the Black Agenda, Mental Health, and Self-Care. So anyone can start.
Hello, my name is Chaz Brackeen. My Facebook name is Chaz Elizabeth Brackeen. That's my name on Facebook. And then also on Instagram, my name is Lady Brackeen 26.
So, okay. Sorry, go ahead, Sheena. Okay. So I know we're doing the social media handles, but I was really searching for the book that I had mentioned earlier, about saving normal. And I even enlisted the help of one of my grad school friends to help me. So I was over here working, trying to find the book. But the name of it is Saving Normal. And it is written by Alan Francis, MD, medical doctor. And he was, I forgot what year it was, but he was chair of the DSM-4 when he was the chair of that task force when DSM was coming out a few years ago, DSM-4. I think we're on version 5 now, or maybe even 6 at this point. But he was the chair a few years back. But the book is called Saving Normal. It's really good. It's a great read, and it definitely talks for Christina. It's a really good book talking about the labeling of kids and how we can prevent that, and how much Big Pharma profited off of the big ADHD, ADD boom. So if you have some time, definitely read. It's a very easy read. But moving on, my Facebook handle is Tiara Anderson. So it's Tiara spelled like Tiara. And my Instagram name is a little bit more difficult. It's Call Me Royal. So CALLROYAL TEE. So Call Me Royalty. And through my personal Instagram, you'll be able to see that I also have a book club. It's called Crowned and Booked Reading Club. So feel free to follow that as well if you like to read. We're always welcoming new people. But thank you all so much for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation.
Oh, I can go. So I am Sheena Hutchinson. So on Facebook, Sheena Hutchinson. And then on Instagram is Sheen So Blessed.
Hello, everybody. Malika Miller here. My only active social media page is Facebook, and it is Danny-Girl Miller. That's DANNY-GIRL Miller, MILLER.
Hi, everyone. I sent it just in case I still sound a little choppy on this one, but hey, clarity. Better late than never. Facebook, you'll find my name, Shenira, SHENIRA, Billups, B as in boy, ILLUPS. My Instagram is still under works, but you'll see me, is at clinical_Lynn, that's LYNN. And I also have, let me see, I said Facebook and Instagram, right? Okay, I have a page, or rather a new website, is my LLC is Mental Growth and Internal Healing. So if you go mentalgrowthandinternalhealing.com, that's my webpage. Again, it's like, still more to be coming. I have events coming up, whatever, and I'll be posted up there. And you can email me at info, that's INFO, MGIH, because it stands for Mental Growth Internal Healing. So it's info.mgih@gmail.com. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. And for those that are still watching, follow me at Alder Darryl Brackeen Jr. We will continue to promote the Black Agenda series. There is an event coming up on Friday that I will be a part of the conversation. You can follow, it's Mount Calvary Revival Center Church. They'll be holding a community conversation where we will continue likely the conversation about the Black agenda. And also in the upcoming weeks, it's no surprise that I'm going to bring up some political events. So here we go. On June 12th, I'll be holding a faith-based conversation with many clergy statewide in the state of Connecticut with the Joe Biden campaign, where we will be talking about the Lift Every Voice Biden plan for the Black American here in America. On June 19th, we will be holding a Divine Nine and Black social justice leaders community conversation to talk about the Lift Every Voice plan by the Vice President. And lastly, we will be holding a young professionals happy hour, virtual happy hour for Black and Hispanic young professionals on June 25th. And we will obviously have a great discussion about how we can collectively ensure that all of our concerns, issues are on the table. There's no way I'm going to let this election in November go without us demanding something. So follow me on Alder Darryl Brackeen Jr. on Facebook. You can find me at D Brackeen Jr. on Instagram, and have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.